just, sorry, it's not light reading, but it would probably make a very good bedtime book. It'll probably put you to sleep really fast. It's got some very nice pictures, and we're not selling any copies today, but if any of you are interested in getting a copy of this, just reach out to us at Vanashakti, and we'd be happy to share it with you. And the idea is for us to understand that this city we live in, this city that has given us so much, we need to give something back to it.
Absolutely. Okay. She can start. Should we?
Should we? Yeah. I want to invite Stalin to say a few words because I think he's generally quoted in newspapers as D. Stalin, Stalin D, Dayanand Stalin, Stalin Dayanand in various avatars. This is who he is. All the reporters chase him. Ask me.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is only to tell you that hardly anyone amongst us would know that Mumbai, even today, has 3,300 acres of forest which has been left out of government records. This book is a result of 2 years of study on the ground, extensively working on the ground. We've discovered so much large areas of forest which have been left out. So we have given this to the government. Our only request is that all of you from your own end try and put pressure on the government to keep these areas inviolate so that the city has a livable air quality and a better climate. We talk of climate change, but somehow we are missing the forest in the entire equation. So this is an attempt to counter that, and I hope everyone will agree with it. And thank you once again for all this opportunity.
I want him to say a few words on a story that broke about 2-3 days back about Adivasis being assaulted, lathi charged, arrested maybe, I don't know, or detained, protesting against the Goregaon Mulund link road. So there's one more assault on RA happening. Why don't you speak a little bit about that?
This is an attempt to evict the Adivasis from their Pada, which is nearer Film City. It's again in close contiguity with RA. The issue is that there was no notice given to the tribals. They were just come one fine day and started pushing them away and say that we're taking over these lands. Again, few of us should know this fact that almost 51 acres of forest land is wrongly in the possession of Film City. The government is not making an effort to get that areas back, but it is hell-bent on pushing the tribals who have not destroyed the forest there out of their own homes. And it is very disheartening and very saddening to see that the women were manhandled and treated very badly. The right to protest is something which we all need to uphold. We have an inherent right in our constitution to protest. Nobody can evict you without following process of law. Infrastructure, yes. Development, yes. But with the consent of people, with the mitigation measures, with adequate compensation, that should be the way forward. But sadly, that approach is missing in this entire process which we are seeing over the last 10 years especially. So these tribals are fighting a bitter battle because they know they have been time and again pushed out of their homes and sent to areas which they are very uncomfortable with. Fertile farmlands are taken away and they are put into small SRA homes where they have no identity, they cannot continue their lives, they have no cultural value left. So it's a tough battle for them. So we need to at least give them the moral support and show that what is happening is unacceptable in a civilized society, and the tribals and the forests need our support. So let's do that.
Thank you for that, Stalin. With that, I think we are ready to welcome Sunita Narayan online. If we can have her on the screen, please. So while they get that up, let me say these few words. To almost every one of us in this room, Sunita Narayan needs no introduction. We have all followed her work on environmental issues for nearly 4 decades. Yet it is my duty and also my privilege this evening to say a few words about her to all of you. Sunita Narayan is currently the Director General of the Center for Science and Environment based in New Delhi, which she joined back in 1982. She is the treasurer. Go ahead. Sunita Narayan is currently the Director General of the New Delhi-based Center for Science and Environment, which she joined back in 1982. She is the treasurer of the Society for Environmental Communications and the editor of the fortnightly magazine many of us follow, Down to Earth. Her passion for environmental causes was first sparked during her student years at the University of Delhi, where she worked with the founder of CSE, the late Anil Agarwal. The scope of her work covers vast areas, from combating air pollution to making water and water management systems everybody's business. From setting up the CSE lab for food and water safety testing to being on committees that brought environmental changes on the ground impacting the lives of many millions. CSE's work on air pollution in Delhi, for example, led, as you know, to the introduction of CNG as fuel in local buses, which then led to a marked reduction in emissions. Delhi continues to be one of the most polluted cities, but that is not on her. Sunita Narayan's work has been wide-ranging, it runs deep, and it has been impactful. Alongside, she has consistently made the time to write, both in the popular mainstream media, where her scathing pieces have been widely shared by many of us, and in spearheading or contributing to important reports on environment. Can you mute yourself? Can you mute yourself in a minute maybe? I'll prompt you. Thank you. Including the first State of India's Environment Report in 1985. Her documentation, activism, and writing has consistently used knowledge for change. Hailing from a family that participated in India's freedom movement, she has carried the values of independent thinking, secular outlook, dedication, and commitment to her chosen field of environment and ecology. Besides steering the CSE into a formidable organization for research and dissemination of knowledge, she has been a member of the Indian Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change and the National Ganga River Basin Authority. She has also chaired the Tiger Task Force at the invitation of the then Prime Minister. She was a pioneer for climate justice long before it became a seasonal favorite and a buzzword. On climate equity, for example, she said, and I quote, "It is unacceptable that it is being said that developing countries do not want to take on climate ambition. The reality is that most of them simply cannot afford it. The system is broken. It needs urgent reform." Close quote. She has also expressed caution about the precarious state of climate action in the unarmed war between the East and the West, calling for cooperation not war, for humanity to survive and for the planet to heal. She was awarded the Padma Shri in 2005, named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2016, and awarded the World Water Prize for her work on rainwater harvesting. In the words of the celebrated author Amitav Ghosh, and I quote, "Sunita Narayan's ideas have significantly shaped some of the key debates of our time. Her voice is urgent, needs to be heard, especially in this era of climate change." Close quote. From walking through urban slums to studying sanitation issues to appearing alongside Leonardo DiCaprio, Sunita Narayan brings her very own brand of uncompromising, clear-headed, straight-talking analysis of global environmental issues to us, all the while keeping a very steady focus on rigorous academics and ground-level impact on millions of people. It is our great privilege to have her here today to deliver the second Darryl de Monte Memorial Lecture. Thank you. Over to you, Sunita.
The book where he talks about Silent Valley and many other environmental conflicts. So clearly, Darryl is part of the growth of the environmental movement as we see it today. So that said, let me explain a little bit of what I wanted to speak to you when on the lecture today on climate change, on the crisis, but also the agenda as we move ahead. I think for all of us who live in India, we don't need to be told that climate change is real. We know it is real. We know it because of the extreme weather events that we are seeing in our world. The Center for Science and Environment has a database where we look at extreme weather events, and you will be shocked to hear that we are beginning to see one extreme weather by 30% of the world's population. And what is even worse is that by 2030, there will be no budget left to keep the world below 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. Now, this basically means that 30% of the world has appropriated 70% of the world budget. And the fact is that the remaining 70% of the world still needs the right to development. Countries like India need the right to development. We still have a crisis of providing energy to millions of people, which is why we need to make sure that we have the right to development. We need different development, but we need development. So it is in this scenario that this war that we are using against nature has to be understood. Because the fact of the matter is, today we will need, countries in Africa will need to grow. We will need to grow. Now, this means that we will have to the emissions in the atmosphere. And that atmosphere has already run out of the space that is needed to keep the world below that guardrail of 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. This is the conversation that we have to have in the world. countries of the North need to be understood, because even today, when the US wants to be a climate champion, it has become the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas, according to the history of the world. So this really is the negotiations and the ability of the countries in the developing world, in the South, to be able to make their point of view clear, to be able to call out these countries and to demand action at the scale that is needed is actually very true. Now, even as I discuss other issues, I wanted to discuss what does India do. For us, the challenge is that we definitely need development, but it is in our best interest that that development is also done differently. It is very clear that we do not have the right to clean air today. We do not have the right to breathe. Our cities are choking in traffic. I'm currently sitting in traffic somewhere in Mumbai. And livability in our cities is going down. The price of the climate change will mean that we will have more water in fewer number of rainy days, which means that you will see more floods and more droughts. We will have more heat because of climate change. And this means that our ability to be able to live and to be able to develop is on the line. Now this is really where, for us, the climate change challenge should be one of the benefits. For us, we need to look at what can we do differently, which is better for us, and which also helps us to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. This is the core benefit agenda. This is the sweet spot that we need to look for, which is something that we can do because we have still not developed completely. We have not built our cities so that we are 100% dependent on automobiles. We have not built our houses so that we cannot plan today for better insulation and better building materials so that we reduce the need for cooling. We have not built up all our energy systems so that we cannot think today of upscaling clean energy at a scale that no one else in the world has done. So these are the real opportunities that we have. And this is really where the core benefits are. I mean, take the issue of air pollution. Very clear in our cities, and I have been part of the Supreme Court mandated authority for many years, no longer part of it, because the government has now set up its own commission on clean air. But nevertheless, I've been part of it for many years, and have been advocating for the need for transition or transformation in the way we do mobility and the way we do combustion. Because that is the only way that we can secure our right to clean air. It is very clear in oil and steel, a minuscule number of people drive a car, minuscule. And yet our road space is 100% occupied. We are building more and more highways, flyovers, and yet even as we build them, they get speed up. We are talking about public transport, but we are not doing it at the scale of the transformation that is needed. The transformation that we need is the kind of thing that we did when we brought in CNG in the early 2000s, in the decade of the early 2000s. When we did that, we literally meant that 100,000 vehicles moved on CNG in Delhi in a matter of a year. That is transformation. But today we are still taking very timid steps. We are not doing the kind of reform that is needed of our public transport so that we have last mile connectivity. We are not adding buses, particularly electric green buses, at the scale that is needed. And most importantly, we are not providing for people to be able to walk, to cycle, to cross the road. These are all
I have a few willing to let. Thank you. I think a bigger round of applause. May I call Narendra Wable on behalf of the Patrakar Sangh to felicitate Sunita. No, let's get it done with so that... Gurbir, you also come. Gurbir, you also come. On behalf of Patrakar Sangh Narendra Wable, on behalf of the Press Club Gurbir Singh.
Again, apologies. But what I thought I'd do now, you've heard me screaming and ranting and raving, I'm sure, from the dark screen. What I thought we could do now is maybe we could take a few questions, because all of you have been here, and that will help me to then focus on the questions that you have, and we can get a conversation. Would that be okay, Zareen? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
We need more mics.
Do we
I saw a hand go up there.
Yeah, just absolutely.
Hello. My name is B.N. Kumar. I've been a journalist. Now I'm sort of an environmental activist running an NGO called Nat Connect Foundation. A couple of times your magazine also covered us on the Parsik Hills case and the mangroves issues. Now, one of the last points that you mentioned was about India scene. Probably you can expand more on that, how India can cope up with this global warming and environmental crisis, and also the policies, the kind of policy changes, even Stalin also mentioned, within the last 10 years, it has been total degradation as far as the environment is concerned. And environmental laws are the most amended acts in the country.
Yes.
So probably you can throw some light on that and probably educate us on that. Thanks.
Yes. So, two questions that he's asked. One, obviously, the big question is the question about the environmental acts and the clearances. Sometimes I feel, Zareen, that, and I can see Dilnavaz here, she was my first boss in Mumbai many years ago, that we were ahead of our time. People like Darryl, Anil, all ahead of their time. The environmental clearance process was set up as a process to really balance environment versus development. The idea was not to stop development. The idea was to make sure that we understood better what is the cost of that development and took some carefully calibrated decisions whether that development could be improved so that it would have less impact on the environment, or whether that development really just was so bad that it needed to be scrapped. Now, over the years, what has happened is that those laws have become on both ends, and I'll be very clear with you, on both sides, they have been abused. On one hand, they have been abused because people do not want to hear that development, any action can be taken to stop development or to delay development. But on the other hand, and that's where I think all of us were ahead of our time, and we haven't really managed it well, is that over the last 2 decades, those processes have become so bad, so convoluted, so corrupt, that you also cannot defend them. Today you have committees sitting to decide whether a development is good or bad. Those committees are faceless, nameless. They set up conditions which can never be met. And yet we believe that because they have given you a conditions, that is fine. So in some senses, we need to recalibrate that. And we need to recalibrate it in our interest today, because your larger question is, what can we in India do? Because we need to find that balance between environment and development. I mean, today, as I was saying, we have reached a point where environment is no longer a luxury. We have reached a point where environment is today in our face. We cannot talk about being rich if we do not have the right to breathe. And the right to breathe is a great equalizer. The fact is, we can pollute our rivers, and we have polluted our rivers. My own city, Delhi, has a river called Yamuna, which is officially dead. It just hasn't been cremated. Its dissolved oxygen level is 0. Any water body with a dissolved oxygen level of 0 is dead. And that's because of the amount of sewage that our cities are not treating and putting into our water bodies. But the point is, rivers will die. Your Mithi river is today gone, defunct. We are a generation of lost rivers, but we will move to bottled water. So why does it really matter? It matters today because if you kill your river, you do not have drainage. And every time you're going to get that horrendous rainstorm, as you will more and more with climate change. And remember, climate change is about increasing frequency. So what was a 1 in a 10-year flood will become a 5-year flood, and then become a 1 in 2-year flood, and then 1 in a every year flood. That's what climate change is about. And that's really where even Mumbai is going to remember the need for Mithi, because that you need it for drainage. You need to make sure that every drop of water can be drained, because otherwise, like you saw in Bangalore this time, that irony, that ultimate irony of people with Mercedes-Benz having to take tractors and boats to get to their homes. That's our situation. But on the whole, you can kill your rivers and you can move to bottled water. But you can't do that with air. You cannot do it with air. The richest people on earth still need clean air to breathe. You can buy your air purifier, you can keep it in your bedroom, but you will still need air, clean air. And because it is such an equalizer, it means that you can't get clean air unless you make sure that everybody has the right to clean air. Which means, this is why I was talking about the right to mobility transformation. Because you can take a car, I take a car, but if the rest of people do not have the right to a bus, a train, or to walk, or to cycle, they will also take a car. And the fact is, 20% of our cities have occupied 90% of the road space. And we are running out of road space. Which means that we need a mobility transformation where the rich can get out of a car, not just the poor. And that's the scale of the transformation we need. And that's the advantage we have. That's the opportunity we have. But it's not going to happen with all these optics that I see today. Ki, you know, हम electric bus कर रहे हैं. हाँ, कर रहे हैं भाई, मगर कितनी buses आई हैं? Buses की आपकी occupancy क्या है? बस क्या connected है आपके metro के साथ कि नहीं? क्या बस अगर मैं लेती हूँ तो मैं road cross कर सकती हूँ कि नहीं? Bombay is better than Delhi, I can tell you, but you're losing it very fast, the advantage. And you have to be able to scale it up, not scale it down. You have huge advantages. You have your suburban rail, which nobody has. You have the metro coming up. You have a bus service which has been in the black till some years ago, which means you have an ability to be able to transform it. But that is still not happening.
Right.
Yes.
That was a very
I think
long,
somebody
very
needs
deep
to
answer,
keep-
but I'm going to ask a top-up question on
Yes.
this. You've seen many governments on the issue of environment. Would you say this is among the more environment unfriendly, unsympathetic governments?
So quite honestly, no. Because I think all governments today are environmentalists. Okay? Every polluter is an environmentalist today. It's too big an issue to ignore. I mean, when I started my career, it used to be tough to find somebody who cared about the environment. Today, everybody cares about the environment. But the point I'm making is the crisis is so big today. We are still looking at solutions which are incremental, which are small. And what I am saying is the scaling up of the solutions needs to be done. I mean, I'll give you from my own example. When, as I said, I was on the Supreme Court committee for many years, reporting to the court. And we had suggested that Delhi should move to compressed natural gas. And the reason was very simple. If you move to gas, you would actually find that you were reducing your emissions very quickly rather than just cleaning up diesel. We were 15 years behind Europe at that time. But if we did what we are doing today with e-buses and e-taxis, that you're bringing in a few here and a few there, nothing would have made a difference. You got two things, and that's what's required today. First, we got a mandate. We got a mandate that said, all buses in Delhi will have to run on CNG. All auto rickshaws in Delhi will have to run on CNG. So which I'm really arguing is that what we need is an electric vehicle mandate, which says very clearly that within the next 3 years, all transport, and we can decide which is the most grossly polluting transport, has to move towards electric and has to move.
Do you see that kind of a mandate coming?
I don't see it coming because I don't think anyone has the appetite for very tough solutions today. And that's the problem.
Right. Here? Yes.
Ms. Narayan, you are based in Delhi, but all of us here belong to Bombay. Mr. Darryl de Monte also from
Yes.
Bombay. Do you think any of us can together, now the time is very precious, do something to stop what is going to happen to the Mahalakshmi racecourse? They are making it into a theme park, a green park. Later on, you know what's going to happen. Do you think seriously all of us can get together to stop that, I don't know what you call it, bastardization of the Mahalakshmi racecourse?
So, I don't see why not. I mean, there are many people here, I can see. Bombay has a hugely active civil society. You have a very strong voice, and you have to stand up for what matters to you in your city. I think that is important, and I did see Bombay standing up. I'm far away in Delhi. Delhi does seem like a different part of the world. But I did see when you had the whole RA colony fight that happened in Mumbai. And I don't see why not. I mean, I think there is huge potential here. You have amazing people who care about this city. I definitely think you can fight, and I definitely think you can win.
Hello, madam.
Next.
Why don't we stop industries, factories, offices for 5 years, give rest to earth, this consumerist consumption, and develop the village industries and create exploratory, laboratory, experimental centers, close down all these pubs and all these bad, negative ideas, and create in the local languages and develop local cultures. So this way, sustainability and affordability will increase. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, all over the world today, they are talking about this concept of what they're calling degrowth. The trouble in India is that you have such a large number of people who need growth that it is hard for you to convince people who don't have today the right to a car that they will never have the right to a car. And I think that is why the strategy in India has to be one which equalizes. I think if instead of doing what you're suggesting, if we did two things, if we talked about, one, strategies which would make sure that everybody has an equal right, say, as I gave you an example of mobility. So you can buy a car, but you don't need to take it out, which means high parking charges, hugely convenient, augmented public transport systems. That's the kind of visions we need to put out. Those are the kind of ideas we need to put out, because those are ideas which are doable, and those are also ideas, in my view, which will get a large number of people on our side. If we become ones in which we divide between the rich and the poor, we are not going to get the action that we require. You talked about industry. It's very clear. The biggest problem with industry today is fuel, clean fuel. CSE did a report on industries around Mumbai, and we were shocked. The amount of petcoke and coal that is used for industrial production in the vicinity of Mumbai, in fact in Mumbai, because Mumbai has grown. So now what is the answer there? Close down the industry or look for clean fuel? What is clean fuel? Gas. Now why can't, after all, when the Supreme Court wanted to save the Taj Mahal, it ordered the government that it had to give the entire Taj trapezium gas which was affordable rate, which was cheaper than the price of diesel and coal, so that people would move to gas. We spend so much money. Why can we not think about a subsidy, a differential between gas and coal, so that we make sure that gas is cheaper than coal? We got it in Delhi when we got the compressed natural gas transition. So the point I'm simply making to you is that the ideas that we need a new imagination for the kind of solutions that we will need for bringing this transition. Those solutions will have to be rooted in the one reality, that if it is not inclusive, it will not be sustainable. And I think that has to be the way in which we can rethink a lot of the challenges we have and find answers.
Hi. Good evening, ma'am. We have been waiting for you to hear in person. I came to Delhi to hear you. That also, when Coca-Cola, you took Coca-Cola on horn. So my point is today is that I am Sudhakar Malpe. I represent a non-government organization which was headed by Dr. Usha Mehta, Gandhian. So we relocated 53,000 families from World Bank Fund who are known to be encroachers in Mumbai, and it became replicable process across India. My question is very simple. The title of today's talk is that Future Agenda for Action. Can you tell this gathering 5 points that we need to follow? We as a citizen of India, citizen of Mumbai. 5 things. If you can list this, we will follow you. We will follow you to Toto. Thank you.
No, I'm really humbled that you asked me for 5 ways, but I don't have them, I have to say. I would love to give you the 5 ways in which we can do things, but unfortunately today, our action will be dependent on what we can push for governments to do. I'm a great supporter of the Prime Minister's Life program. I heard when I was in the car, somebody discussed it. Lifestyle for sustainable environment. It's a wonderful idea. You're putting consumption on the table. You're putting lifestyle on the table. But my problem is that those lifestyle changes will need to be enabled through some policy and practice changes. So very simple thing, I would love to tell you take a bus, but I can't. I don't take a bus. How do I tell you to take a bus? And I don't take a bus because there are no buses to be taken at the speed and the scale that we need today. Our bus ridership, and I was looking at figures even from Mumbai are going down rather than going up, which means that's not a solution for us. I can tell you definitely to segregate your waste. Now, I am assuming that this hall of people already segregate their waste. Don't you? No? No?
Hello?
Okay, then I'm shocked. That is the one thing there is absolutely, you don't need any government to do that. You don't need anyone. You can do that at home. Just, okay. Okay, I'll explain that. That's where the government has to come in. You're right. Yes. That's exactly what she's saying. Yeah. 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 No, I have looked at the BMC track record on garbage. We've actually been doing a lot of work looking at it. So it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Okay, I have the lady at the back. Yes. That's what I'm hearing.
So no matter what the societies do, no matter what the BMC regulations are, waste segregation is not being implemented in Bombay. There are some of us who do home composting, there are some of us who do recycling, but even if 10% of the population of Bombay was to handle their own waste the way it should be handled, we still have a huge problem. And that problem is driven by the fact that the BMC is not interested in doing anything because on every truck of waste, the corporator gets 100 rupees.
Yes, let me move.
I have that lady at the back. I have Dilnawaz in front.
She has a question and then we'll come here.
Societies in Malabar Hill area where BMC is trying to teach each and every society to segregate the waste. And believe it or not, only 200 we could get. The societies are refusing. So that culture of segregation or their understanding of segregation is also not happening in the minds of people. I'm very sorry to say this. I'm not for BMC. In fact, and so now we are going to do compulsory for all these 400 societies.
If I may step in, I think there is a lot that the BMC needs to do on the waste segregation bit without taking away anything. And there is a lot that citizens in Mumbai also need to do on this issue. But I would really like to move on with two other questions. You had something.
Let me just finish the waste issue and then we can close it. Do you have something on the waste issue that is a burning issue?
There is an exception.
Yes.
My society, which has 6,000 people staying there, we segregate. The dry waste goes out through a contractor for his recovery, what he does. The wet is taken by BMC. So I think there's a mixed, maybe the island city has a different culture, or maybe my society has a different culture.
Thank you.
So
it's an uneven story.
It's a mixed story, but I think this is the opportunity story. Because this is the possibility where Again, one of the, I was asked this question, what can we do? Okay. Well, one of the big issues that is coming out in India and a new approach that is coming out is, whereas the rest of the world treated the environment as an issue which had to be cleaned up after we polluted, in India, we cannot afford to do that because we are too poor to clean up after we pollute. So for us, the approach has to be, how can we make sure pollution is a resource? Now this is where and I must say over the last few years, the government of India has understood this. So initially, the whole waste issue for the government of India was one of visible cleaning. That let's look at a city, how clean is it? That there is no kachada on the road. Today, the government of India's own understanding is, how good is a city in terms of the amount of waste it processes? How much wealth does it make out of the waste? Now, this is where the opportunity is. I mean, if you go to the city of Indore, or if you go to the city of Pune, Pune is doing biomethanation. Indore is making CNG out of their wet waste. They're running buses from the garbage that they get out of their households. So, and the government today has a compressed natural gas program where huge subsidy is being given to cities to set up a CNG plant, or CBG plant as it's called, compressed biogas, which is made out of the wet waste of your city, in which there is compulsory offtake of the gas that you will produce. Now that's a new approach. It's the same approach. Sorry, I just want to finish this point because the whole issue of how much can you reuse? I mean, we've just completed a study, and I'm going back to what can be done, a study on the iron and steel sector, on the cement sector. These are called hard-to-abate sectors. Sectors where we don't know how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. The approach that comes out very clearly is, how much can these industries reuse the waste of other industries so that they can actually bring down their carbon footprint? I do a lot of work personally on excreta. So in CSC, I'm known for shit flow diagrams. So we do shit flow diagrams where we look at city after city, how much shit is produced, how much of it is transported, how much of it is treated. Now, even in the city of Mumbai, you will be shocked to know that most of the excreta that you produce is produced on site, which means it is not connected to the official sewage system. It is only in this part of Mumbai that it is connected. But this is a great opportunity. So for the last some years, we have been convincing the government to say, why do we need underground sewage? After all, India went to the cell phone. When we started off CSC, we had to go and get somebody to sign off on a telephone line for us. Today, we all have connectivity because we changed the approach. So can we not think of sewage in the same way? Why do we have to do underground sewage lines? Why can't we just make sure that the sewage from the tanks, from the septic tanks, is collected? There is a tanker with a GPS. That tanker takes it to a sewage treatment plant. But the most important thing is, you reuse the treated sewage and the sludge back on the ground. And that's the ultimate change, because at the end of the day, we eat food. We take the nutrition from the ground, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, we excrete it, and now we put it back in rivers. If you put it back on the ground, you also close the circle of productivity of putting your own sewage back on the ground after treatment. So that's the approach that we need. When I talk about the change in approach and I talk about scaling that up, these are the ideas we need. We need courage, we need imagination. Because otherwise you'll have all the engineers standing up and saying, Madam, ये तो नहीं होगा, इसे तो cholera हो जाएगा, ये कैसे करेंगे, ये तो कभी हुआ ही नहीं है, ये तो किसी ने कभी नहीं किया. So that's the courage. that we need. Sorry, I went on a long-winded
We have time for
thing
2
when we were
questions.
waiting.
We have time for 2 more questions there and then here.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll be really quick. So you mentioned electric vehicles. So I wanted to ask if India is ready to have a mass mandate for electric vehicles if we are not providing them with clean energy, and if we are still funding, our budgets are still funding the coal produced energies. That's the first part. And secondly, I wanted to ask is, when we are having large-scale solar-related electric grid projects, and they are cutting across, biomes and sensitive zones. So how do we balance this value between, this is the budget that is provided for the thing, and this is the environmental costs for it?
This is such a brilliant question, and this is one of the biggest questions that today is actually all over the world. So, when I'm talking, when you're talking, we're all talking about this crisis of climate change. And we're talking about the fact that we need a new energy system. We need electric vehicles. We need to get out of fossil fuel. We need to have an augmented clean energy system, renewable energy, solar, wind. We need all that. So the question that is now bothering people is, and I think it should bother us a lot, is that when we are talking about this reinvented world, this new world that we want, which will transition into a clean world, is it going to have the same business practices as the old world? Is it going to make sure that it does not listen to the communities when it builds its solar projects, when it builds its wind projects? Is it going to make sure that it does not look for the balance between environment and development and go through the forest areas? Is it going to make sure that when it mines for nickel, for copper, for lignite, the biggest new critical mineral fields that the world is today looking at, is that agreement with communities going to be different? Fascinating article came out last week from the US. 90% of the US critical mineral reserves are found on the lands of the it's not Aboriginal people, but the Indian American in the US. 90%. Now this has actually a parallel to us. Most of our minerals are found in the lands of the poorest people of India, the tribals. Okay? It's the same thing today in the US, where the US has said it's not doing coal mining anymore because it has found shale, but it wants to do lignite, it wants to do copper, and it wants to do, lithium, nickel, and copper. Now, if it wants to do those mines, they are in the lands of the American Indians. Is it going to have a conversation with them? Is it going to talk to them about their rights, their needs, and what is it that they believe in? One of the most fascinating things that is happening in the world, if I may complete this, is the fact that you are now talking about, from globalization, you're going into regionalization or localization. The most interesting thing started off with Indonesia, which turned around and said, yes, we have nickel and we have lithium, we are not going to export it. You come and set up your factories here. Zimbabwe has now said the same. So this could just end up being a new compact between people and the environment for the new economy. That will also talk about consumption. That will also talk about the cost of production. So there are opportunities in all this. The question is, how desperate are we and how willing are we to listen to the voices of dissent, which we call dissent today, but they're actually voices that if we heard better, we will tread lightly on earth.
Thank you. Here.
Yeah, Sunita, just a short question.
I give long answers, unfortunately.
Moving away from this discussion,
one of the most critical aspects of climate crisis is rising temperature.
Yes.
And living in cities, many of us, and across cities which are expanding, and we're saying more and more people are going to be living in cities, the temperatures in cities are generally much higher.
Yes.
Due to the intensity of built environment.
Yeah.
So the point I'm asking is, there has not been, as far as I'm informed, not much work done or taken to the environmental movement's agenda of how do we regulate the rising temperatures due to intense building construction activity and depletion of trees. Just two aspects, because this is causing havoc amongst people in terms of mental health and physical health. What we call is the heat stress.
No, you are absolutely right. And you know, Mumbai has it even worse than Delhi because you have the wet bulb phenomena here, where you don't even have dry heat is still easier with a little ventilation to live with. Your problem is really one which is even worse as heat goes up and humidity goes up. Now, you're absolutely right. This whole issue of heat is something that we will have to understand. And we will have to deal with it very quickly. We have been doing these heat maps of cities and looking at what makes, and it's not rocket science. You know the city, if you do a heat map, you will know where is the heat the most intense is where there are high-rise buildings, concrete, no green area, and no wet zones, no water bodies. That's the area where you have the highest heat in a city. Now, if you want to reverse it, you clearly need to look at all those aspects. First, as you know very clearly, we need to build our buildings differently. I mean, one of the most bizarre things in India has been this concept of what we call a modern building, which has to have glass. I mean, glass is one of the worst things for India because it traps the heat. And yet, if you look at the building codes of India, they don't really disincentivize. They now do because we've really been making a fuss about it. What you call wall window ratio or some ratio like that in terms of glass. So you need to make sure that you do passive architecture, you do your orientation of your buildings correctly so that you're building with the sun, not against the sun. You make sure that you have green areas. You make sure again that you have water bodies. And you make sure that you don't think about only air conditioning after you've built badly. And I think those are the questions that we will have to take on, and very quickly. I mean, most cities of the world are now talking about a heat officer. A heat officer who would actually, my point in a country like India is, what would the heat officer do? You need to make sure that these are incorporated into building codes. They're incorporated into master plans. They're incorporated into the way we are doing our new development. That's what we need to do, and quickly.
And may I just add one point which
Yes.
I request you to take it up in your agenda about cities, is really regulating building density. Not just people's density, but construction of buildings density, because that's what is causing havoc with the grounds disappearing completely. In a city like Mumbai, the new development control regulations now allow to do away with open space regulation on plots. You can take the entire open space provision onto your podium. So there will be no ground left to live happily.
Yeah. I'm sure you have many, many more questions. Many of you want to meet her, but we can do it off the stage. Because we really have to close the evening. May I invite Samir de Monte to offer a vote of thanks. Thank you again for being so patient.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Sunita for delivering the second Darryl de Monte Memorial Lecture. It's so fitting that my father, Darryl, never failed to mention that it was Anil Agarwal of the CSE who first inspired his interest in the environment and was his first mention, a first spark, in terms of his passion for the environment. And now it's come full circle where you are giving a lecture in his memory. So thank you for your very sparkling and insightful talk. Would like to thank all the organizers of this event, both in their capacity as organizers, as well as for being dear friends to my father during his lifetime. Starting with Gurbir Singh of the Mumbai Press Club and its staff, who helped tremendously to make this event a success. The Mumbai Marathi Patrakar Sangh, who very graciously gave us this hall for this lecture. Vanashakti for participating in this event and for also doing so much for the cause. P.K. Das, eminent architect and founder of Pudi. His initiative called A Question of Cities, along with Smriti Kopikar, is presently taking on issues of the urban environment. So this is a freely available online magazine, so I urge each of you to add it to your monthly reading list. It's available online at questionofcities.org. Bittu Segal of Sanctuary Magazine. I recall my father showing me issues of Sanctuary Cub as a child. We have to appreciate Bittu's tremendous foresight and courage to publish not just a nature magazine, but also a nature magazine for children from the 1980s onwards, which 40 years later has inspired many current professionals to dedicate their entire lives to engaging with nature. Then there's Rafiq Elias, the man behind all the wonderful artwork and design, including the stage and the setting for this event. His artwork has set the entire tone for the whole event. Smriti Kopikar for anchoring this event so gracefully and for the very detailed and well-researched introduction to Sunita. I thank all of you for coming to listen to Sunita and hope we can all leave this event with a greater understanding of the dangers ahead and a commitment to do all we can to save ourselves and this planet. And lastly, perhaps, I think I should thank my father too for showing us very early on what mattered most for our survival. Thank you.